Right now, today, if Scott Robertson was selecting his first All Black side of the year, then Beauden Barrett would most definitely be starting at first five. I don't think there's a question about that.
Boy, another reminder that Joseph Suaalii is an extraordinary talent.
The way that he just manhandled McKenzie, then Tupaia, and carried two or three guys over the line.
I was as stunned as anyone else, partly because of how poorly Damien McKenzie played. That was, for an All Black to drop the ball, I think it was 7 times, was just stunning.
Welcome to the DSPN.
John Walker wins the 1,500 metres gold medal at the Olympic Games.
The All Blacks have won by 29 points tonight.
The Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome to the podcast, people. Marty Devlin, Lachlan Waugh. It's Monday, so it's a big rugby review from Super Rugby Round 9. Tony Johnson joining us from Sky Sport, as always, for a New Zealand perspective, and Christy Doran from the Raw out of Sydney, giving us a look from the other side of the Tasman. As always, we will do our rugby rankings. And last week, well, we obviously made some kind of an impact, perhaps not exactly what we wanted. We made the New South Wales Waratahs Instagram page for picking that the Chiefs would end their season, which of course didn't happen at all, did it? If you like what you're looking at and what you're hearing as far as Rover or wherever you find your favourite podcasts audio-wise, well then support us, please. That's what we need you to do. Click on subscribe on the DSPN YouTube channel. It really does help. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers as quick as possible. We put out a lot of clips as well on social media across Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and Twitter. So if you do like it, let somebody else know. It really does help us. We begin the show the same way every day.
Marty Sermons, brought to you by WebWonks. Generate online leads with WebWonks. Doctors for your Google data.
We live in an amazing, amazing world, and it's wasted on the crappiest generation of just spoiled idiots.
What did we learn from Super Rugby Round 9? A whole heap in no particular order. We learned that I can't pick him. 44 matches played over 9 rounds. I don't have a clue. No way was I backing New South Wales to beat the Chiefs. No way. Nor the Brumbies to whack the Reds like that. 39-26 in Brisbane after being down 14-0. What a comeback. That's a 39-12 turnaround for the Brumbies. And if you take the last minute tries to each team off the scoreboard, it was 34-14 after 79 minutes, or 34 unanswered points from the Brumbies to win it. In other words, it was a beatdown. It was a toweling. So what does it tell us? 2 of the top 3 in the comp got turned over, meaning still this late in the competition, every team is capable of turning up and not turning up, if you know what I mean, including even the Chiefs. No one team has yet established real championship-winning consistency. I think we learned that right now today, if Scott Robertson was selecting his first All Black side of the year, then Beauden Barrett would most definitely be starting at first five. I don't think there's a question about that. Barrett was brilliant versus Moana Pasifika on Saturday, while Damien McKenzie had an absolute bazzer. That was his worst game of the year. Played a shocker, as did the Chiefs. A wounded, shell-shocked Waratahs, who remember had just come off a fortnight conceding 102 points to the Canes and Moana, beat the supposed best side in New Zealand. Very sobering indeed. Joseph Suaalii made mincemeat of his All Black opponents, running over them, running through them, like they weren't even there. Worst performance of the campaign for the Chiefs, and probably rewrites everyone's thinking around these guys are actually beatable. Maybe not so much in Hamilton, but definitely on the road. Both their losses have been away from home. The Crusaders, meanwhile, simply reasserted themselves. How did that line go in Finding Nemo? Just keep winning, winning, winning. Back on top, easily whacking the Hurricanes. They are this week the number 1 team in New Zealand and the comp. Best team in Australia, though, is not the Reds. Not after being laid to waste like that in Brisbane. And I think finally we learned that the Blues are a real chance of making the playoffs. Well, they will if they keep fronting up and playing like that, like they've been expected to all season. Defending their title could well come down to the next couple of games, though. Away the Crusaders and away the Reds. They've got to win one of those. This comp this year has been excellent from the first round. What do we want? We want narratives, intrigue, storylines, and unpredictability. We want the unknown, and we're getting it. With 6 rounds to play, 10 teams can still make the finals. It really is that close.
Devlin.
Time for our weekly Super Rugby rankings, Lachlan.
Yes!
And this again is where we vibe, we feel. The only real rankings, as I remind you every week, ladies and gentlemen, go like this. Top of the table, Crusaders, Chiefs, Brumbies, Reds, Waratahs, Force. Draw a line, there's your top 6. Highlanders, Hurricanes, Blues, Moana Pasifika, Drua. Last week, I had the Chiefs, Crusaders, Reds, Brumbies, MP, Blues, Canes, Force, NS Dub, Highlanders and Drua in that order. We start from the bottom and we work our way to the top. Number 11, they were 11 last week. Season over, bar this playing for pride thing, which we'll hear over the next few weeks, the Drua. They got to win a couple at home. That's about it. Last year, 7th. Very nearly made it. This year, disappointing. Not quite up to it. You're not going to argue with that, are you? The Drua are last.
No, that was probably the easiest. If I am allowed to bring in my own rankings of sorts, that's the easiest team to place, is the Drua being dead last.
7 points. Now, I don't have a 10th and a 9th this week. I've got 9th equal. 9th equal, Moana Pasifika and the Highlanders. Moana, I had 5 last week. Highlanders, I had 10 last week. Back down to earth with a real thump for MP. Lowest points scored for the season, just 17. Ill discipline, very costly. They blew their lines badly. Highlanders were efficient, flamboyant, but it was against the team that everyone puts 40 on at home. So I can't separate 9 and 10, so I've given them 9th equal. And that is Highlanders and MP.
Yeah, for me, it's tricky. I want to say I think the Highlanders are a better side, but again, you know, the way Moana Pasifika have played the last month
they beat the Highlanders. Sorry, the Highlanders beat MP, didn't
that was
they?
early in the season.
Yeah.
I think Moana are a slightly different team now. Then again, the Blues played very well, and Moana Pasifika were really stifled out of that contest, particularly early on.
Suffocated
through a lot of the set piece work from the Blues. So I don't know. I honestly think, you know, 1 for me. Obviously, you'll get 26 is obvious. I think 2 through 5 is relatively obvious, and I think after that it's a free-for-all.
It's a log jam. Yeah. 8, Hurricanes. I had them at 7 last week. Again, just can't seem to get it together to beat anyone of importance. 2 losses now to the Blues, 2 to the Crusaders. So they are where they deserve to be. They're in 8th spot. 16 points. They're a win out of the top 6. But their season just is... And again, when you're sitting there with a record like they've got of 3 and 5, 2 below the 500, somehow they've got to find some consistency, the Hurricanes. I don't know where it's coming from. They just don't look a great side.
Well, they look very stop-start, as you just said. They will have a good result, or there'll be promising signs. There was the Highlanders win. The result against the Blues in Wellington earlier this year I thought was encouraging.
They lost.
They lost, but it was encouraging. They were a little bit unlucky. And then there's the Waratahs game where everyone is sitting there going, here we go, they're back. And then the Blues game where they should have been up by a lot more in the first half. Yeah. That got away from them. And then the Crusaders game again, blown out really in the first, or sort of that middle part of the game. Came back. But it was... Yeah. So they are the toughest team to work out, at least they've got the... Let me get the schedule here. So it's Blues Crusaders. So they've got the Force away. That's never easy when you have to go over and play them away. And then they've got the Brumbies in Canberra. And based on Saturday night, the Brumbies are not going to be an easy team to beat. And then they've got the Chiefs at home. So they could very well go 0-3 in that stretch and their season be killed.
And at 7, I got the Force. They were 8 last week, 4 and 4, a great return for them. But here comes reality for the Force. 3 New Zealand sides on the bounce. Even if they win one of those games, I don't believe it's enough to make it. I think they're toilers. I think they're battlers. I think they're always a threat, the Force, against the Aussie sides because they are rivals, but they're not a finals prospect. I don't have them. I've got them at 7, but I don't have them in the top 6, and I don't see them making the top 6.
Okay, last time you said this about a team, it was the Waratahs last week, and they beat the Chiefs. So are you just going to give you a chance to potentially take that back?
Argue with me. Force 4 and 4. Are they going to make the top 6? They're sitting in 6th
home to the
spot at the moment.
Very winnable. They would probably be the bookies' favourites for that, I would think, based on form and the fact that they are at home. But then they're away to the Chiefs, who, again, I said this a week ago, and I'm going to hit... I've actually said it for about a month or so. I'm going to hit it harder. The Chiefs have not looked good for the last 4 or 5 games they've played.
Well, they haven't looked their best.
Well, they haven't looked great. They should... The game against the Blues in Hamilton, I maintain, was a win gone bigging for the Blues. They obviously are against the Reds. I think, you talked about the weather helping the Reds out. I think the weather probably helped both teams out in a sense. I don't think that was a great Chiefs performance. And then they get beaten pretty handily by the Waratahs. If anything, that score flatters the Chiefs. So Where are the Chiefs at?
Well, we're going to wait to get to the Chiefs. At the moment, we're talking about the Force.
That's winnable. The Force can absolutely catch the Chiefs, and that's on Anzac Day, so they could catch the Chiefs off guard.
And it's 6, top 6 now. I got New South Wales. Last week I had them at 9. Best win of the season for them. Who really saw that coming, though? Spanked twice in New Zealand. Well,
I put money on the Waratahs.
Okay, I mean, I got egg all over the face. Ended up making the social media sites, the Instagram site for the Waratahs, and they had a little clip of us at the beginning with me saying that the Chiefs are going to end their season. And at the time, in my defence, there weren't a lot of people arguing when I said that. And this was a side that had just conceded 102 points against the Hurricanes and against Moana Pasifika. They caught the Chiefs on the night of their worst performance of the season. Fair play to them. They're in the top 6. I'm not getting carried away by that. They're away the Drua next. And because it's away, they're just as likely to get dumped on again. Then it's the Reds and the Brumbies. Okay.
Well, they've got a bye.
So I still very much have my doubts about this team.
They've got the Brumbies away, and then they have the Reds at home.
Having said that, they've won all of their matches at home. They're obviously very strong at home. If they could end their schedule playing at home and get a home semi-final, well, yeah, fair play to them. But at the moment, and they did play well. I'll give them that. They played bloody well against the Chiefs, and Joseph Suaalii was a beast. Mm-hmm. However, the week before...
Yeah, he got absolutely poleaxed in a tackle by Balin Sullivan.
That's right. And so he's running all over Tupai, running all over McKenzie, running all over the All Blacks. But the week before, against the Hurricanes, he was weak.
But isn't that a great little representation of the whole season?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you've got the Crusaders who got just absolutely out-muscled and outplayed in every facet of the game against Moana Pasifika, and then they looked dynamite in parts against the Hurricanes, and then you have Moana Pasifika who got completely dominated by the Blues, who about a month ago got just destroyed by the Crusaders. So the season is all over the place.
Yeah, and look, and I think that is reflective of, isn't it? And Tony Johnson was saying it to us earlier on the show, on the podcast, saying that no team has won more than 3 in a row. And that's unusual for this competition because we're normally seeing, they're used to it year after year.
The Chiefs haven't. Surely the Chiefs have won 3
well,
in a row.
Apparently no one's won more.
Just with the Waratahs, again, I'm very defensive of the Waratahs, but they have a very workable draw. Fijian and Drua away, that's the worst team in the comp.
I think that's easy. I think the Drua are going to win another game.
You've got to look at form. The Drua beat the Chiefs, but every other game they've had in Fiji, they've lost, right? They're
going to win another game at home.
Will they? Who knows? Why so you were so confident that the Waratahs would lose last week?
The comp is so bing bong lala that it's going to happen.
Bing bong lala that maybe it's actually easy to win in Fiji. Point is, Waratahs then have the bye away to the Brumbies. That'll be tough, but it's a game in Australia. Canberra's not too far from Sydney. Last time I checked. Then they've got the Reds at home, workable. Then they've got the Crusaders at home, workable. They're toughest, but it's in Sydney. You said it yourself. They're good at home. Their last game is the toughest one without a doubt, and that's away to the Blues. Because by that point, the Blues...
That's a hell of a run.
If the Blues can win one of the Reds or the Crusaders... I know I'm jumping ahead here, but one of the Reds or the Crusaders games over the next couple of weeks, that game against the Waratahs in the final week, they are playing for this season.
Well, I'm going to ask Christy all about this because he works out of Sydney and what his thoughts are on it shortly. In at 5, I've got the Blues. I had them at 6 last week. Georgia are on the way back. Their record is only 3-5. They're starting to win like they did last year, though. Tough and physical and direct. And with Beauden Barrett playing like that, even though there are questions about his goal kicking, they are a very real threat. No one will want to play them first round of the finals. Remember last year we were all saying if the Crusaders make it, who's going to want to play them? And I think the Blues are in that position at the moment. If they make the finals, no one's going to want to play them because they will get their players back and they look as though they're on an upward trajectory. They deserve to cop it earlier in the season. That was their best performance against Moana Pasifika.
Oh, a couple of things. I'll pull you up on they deserved to cop it.
They did.
No, they didn't because they dealt with injuries. We've been through this and you just happily have been praising the Crusaders without acknowledging that the Crusaders, are playing well this year because they have those players back, which proves that their poor form. No, they actually had a lot of injuries at the start of the year.
That's right.
But they did, first couple of games they weren't looking too good. And then last year, of course, didn't have those players, didn't perform well. Blues are going through the same thing. But like the Crusaders, as you say, we're talking about, hey, if they can get into the finals, okay, they've got a couple of wins now. Can we get some momentum? It all relies on actually winning those games.
Well, we're going to find out a hell of a lot about the Blues this coming Friday night, aren't we? Because they go down to Christchurch. Yeah. And if they lose that game, they're back almost to square one. If they win that game, if they knock the Crusaders off in Christchurch, look out.
Well, there's no reprieve because then a week later they're away to the Reds. It's not as if they can just put their feet up and just, chill out.
Reds are at 4. They were at 3 last week. Back-to-back losses for the first time all season, but it's the manner in which they lost to the Brumbies, which will be of real concern. 34 unanswered points at home was the swing. They were thrashed. Just like the Chiefs, it's a very sobering loss. And they've only lost 3 games, the Reds. They've lost to the Chiefs, they've lost to the Crusaders, but this one is a real worry. They were 14-0 up, and they conceded 34 unanswered points. That says an awful lot. That's why the Brumbies go ahead of them into third spot. Do you agree with that?
Yes, because the Brumbies beat them.
Yeah. And I think they seem to be getting better and better. Canes, Waratahs, Force, the next 4 fixtures. MP, Canes, Waratahs, Force, the next 4 fixtures for the Brumbies. I can see them probably winning 3, if not all of those.
Well, Moana
clearly the
Pasifika
best
now,
side of
I think
Oz.
we've got a potentially, not question, that's maybe a little harsh, but I think the rise of Moana can be halted a little bit purely because of how they were just totally outplayed by the Blues, who, you were ripping into saying that they're no good.
Well, they've got the Brumbies this weekend, 4:35.
And
That's
Brumbies,
again, the Crusaders, Blues, MP, Brumbies, they're 2 huge matches for Blues and MP. If they lose those games, they're going to be way adrift.
Well, the Blues are 5 points out of the top, 4 points out of the top 6. So a win this weekend, if they win, obviously it's a massive if, because it's the Crusaders away. That only gets them to 6 if other results go their way, because the Force are at home to the Canes, I believe. Yep. So, yeah, it's just a logjam.
And the Brumbies away at MP, and if the Brumbies win that game...
Well, MP are only 5 points off the top 6, and they're in 10th.
Okay, I think our top 4, though, I think most people agree, right? It's whatever order you want to put them in. The 2 New Zealand sides are probably at the top, and the Reds and the Brumbies are 3 and 4. And I think all 4 teams are going to make the finals. Can we agree on that at this stage?
Yes, we can. I think it would have been a different question had the Brumbies lost to the Reds, but they went up there and won, of course. Now they're into 3rd. I think the Crusaders Chiefs will be interesting, especially if the Chiefs can win the return fixture.
They just squished them. The Brumbies just squished them in that game is what they did. They just got the ball. They did what the Blues did. They just kept it in the confines and they just rolling mauled them to death. Number 2, the Chiefs. That's got to be a flush the dunny and move on result, doesn't it? To quote Sir Steve Hansen, it has to be, doesn't it? That wasn't the Chiefs. That wasn't Damien McKenzie. Both their team and their best player were awful.
I think your bias is showing through a little bit here. For whatever reason, you're a big fan of the Chiefs because can I go through... Okay, so they lost to the...
It's only their second loss.
Let me just say, okay, so the Brumbies game, which was their 3rd of the season, you said this more than I did, that scoreline,
it flattered them, but they still deserve to win.
But flattered the Chiefs,
Yeah,
which suggests that the Chiefs didn't play as well as the score suggests.
Okay, that's right.
They then lost to the Indrua. They then beat a Blues side that you're giving it to by 1 point. At that point, I don't think the Blues had won a game yet. No, they'd beaten the Hurricanes, excuse me, but they weren't looking good at all. They then conceded 28 points in the second half to Moana Pasifika. Very ordinary showing in the second half. They then played the Reds in wet weather with only won by 12.
They
didn't
won
look perfect.
comfy.
No, they didn't. They didn't look perfect at all. And then they lost to the Tars. Point is, you're acting like the Chiefs are the runaway favourites for the title.
No, I said they're not the. But I still.
But you can't say flush the dunny and move on.
Well, you can from that performance.
6 of them. Those 6 results have all been in many ways underwhelming.
Okay, I think it's their second loss of the campaign. I don't think there's any great cause for panic. They're still way on track for a home semi-final. They get the Highlanders at home this coming weekend, right? They win that game.
If they win that game, it is not
it's not a gimme.
It's not a lock. This is a tough Highlanders team to beat.
It's not a gimme, but it's not a gimme. I think Chiefs have got to go in favourites.
Yeah, of course, but I think it's more than a flush the dunny and move on.
Right now, number 1 team in the comp in our rankings is the Crusaders.
Your favourite team.
They're the best side in New Zealand and the comp. 2 losses all year, blown out by the Chiefs and that toweling at home by MP. So they're not the same side that won 7 titles in a row. We know that, but they are definitely back where no one wants them to be, which is on top. And we've all seen this way too many times before. They're not playing their best or most consistent rugby, and you can't accuse any team in the competition of being playing their most consistent rugby because everyone's had their ups and downs. But for the rest of the field, the fact that the Crusaders are on top must be worrying. It's got to be worrying because they know how to win this competition.
Worrying? Yes. I'd probably lean towards them more so than anyone else to actually win the whole thing because they have that Chiefs game at home, which will put a bit of daylight between them two, assuming the Crusaders win it and defend their home field.
Assuming they beat the Blues this weekend. If the Blues go down to Christchurch and beat them, all bets are off. All bets are off.
I don't think the red alarm bells and the lights are flashing, but there's a little flicker of a light. Just, that was a good Blues performance on. And if Beauden Barrett and Steve Perifetta, if they kick their goals, it's a much bigger scoreline.
Yeah, a very encouraging performance. But a very encouraging performance in what has been a very lacklustre season. So again,
and why has it been a lacklustre season?
Because they haven't played like they should be playing as defending champions.
Been missing pretty much
Everyone's
their entire.
Talk about the Hurricanes injury problems.
I was just about to say the Hurricanes have had problems.
Every team's got injury problems.
No, it's what I'm saying.
The poor old Drew have lost half their side.
Have they?
Have they?
I don't know.
know.
The Crusaders were missing a lot of guys in the first few weeks, quite a few players, and they didn't play well at all. I think they were, through their first 3, they were 2-1 short, but they didn't look good, and they've started to build. This is the point of when you cannot ever say that a team should be playing close to their best when they are missing more than, or essentially a starting 15, which is what the Blues were. It was the same as the Crusaders last year. It's the same as the Hurricanes this year. It is the Blues this year as well.
Crusaders, Chiefs, Brumbies, Reds, they're our top 4. Blues, New South Wales at 5 and 6.
Your top 4.
Force, Canes, Highlanders, MP, and Drua.
So have you got the Blues
lagging last? I got the Blues at 5th.
I think we've actually got the same top 6. Crusaders, Chiefs, Brumbies, Reds, Blues, Waratahs. Yeah. Okay.
Our rankings are the real rankings.
DSPN.